What's up, friends? Today we're taking a look at an extremely interesting new product from Exway, and that is the Aux Pack. In these two boxes here, we've got the Exway Atlas Pro top lid and the Aux Pack that will work together to give your Atlas Pro an enormous amount of range. What that number is exactly, I don't know yet, but we're going to make sure to test that before the complete review of this plus that board. So let's jump into this teardown and start looking at some interesting stuff. Well, before we actually take a look at the battery, we have to unbox it. So sorry if there's an extra noise in the background. My 3D printer is working very hard to print me new parts. So first thing you see when you open the box is the massive chunky power cable. This thing apparently is good for 140 amps continuous, which I totally believe given the enormous size of these contacts. You also get the ratchet strap, which is definitely an interesting take on attaching an enclosure to a board, but it is pretty foolproof. So you have that. It's actually customized with the Exway logo, which is interesting, and it has a nice short strap. Under this gigantic piece of foam, you have the actual battery. And this thing is a beast. It's quite heavy. And we'll go ahead and weigh it here so you can get an idea. But this thing is quite chunky. All right, so I've got my package scale here, and you can see that we come out to 22.2 pounds for just the pack itself. And then if we go ahead and add on the ratchet strap and the big old connector, we come up to 23.1 pounds. Definitely not an insignificant amount to add to your board, but hey, I mean, you're getting tons more range, so it's probably worth it. So let's do a quick rundown of what we've got here. The top case of this battery is made of what I believe is polycarbonate, nice plastic material. The sides are all aluminum, very solid. And then on the bottom, you've got gigantic rubber shock absorbing material, as well as the interface area that connects onto the lid. You can see the raw aluminum here. I'm not sure if that was like an additional modification made later, but that shows that it is metal. The whole base plate is metal, very thick, probably 1/4 inch around the outside, and I'm guessing like 1/8 of an inch around the inner area. The outside parts where the strap runs through are both metal as well. And the top parts where the strap runs through are part of the what appears to be single piece top panel, but that is more than enough. On top here you have your screen where you can view the battery percentage and voltage, which I really like. So you can see right now it's at 48.2 volts, about 86.3%. The rest up top, you've got some information about the battery, your serial number, 24,000 milliamp hours, 1,037 watt hours, maximum input of 20 amps through the charge port, which is right here. You've also got some warnings on here. Power interface is always active. That is interesting to know. So that means that if you shove your finger in here or a piece of metallic something, you could short it out. Obviously that's going to be a little bit difficult since this is the female side, but good to know. You've got this big old rubber flap here that covers up the port when it's not being used. And then on the back here, we've got 2 ports. This one is a USBC output up to 100 watts, which is great. You could charge a laptop with that if you want to. On the other side, you have another USB output, but it's USBA, which is up to 25 watts max, which is still not bad. You can still charge a decent amount of devices off that, including your remote, which is always super useful to have. Anything else interesting here? We got the charge port on the side. And this one is particularly interesting to me because this claims to be able to take up to 20 amps, which is a massive amount of current for a small plug. So this connector right here must be a custom one, because I don't know of any existing connectors that we commonly use in eSkate. One, that look like this, and two, that can take 20 amps at this size. So that's pretty cool. I'll be looking forward to testing out that 1000 watt charger when it shows up later this month. So that's a pretty good overview of what we've got for the Aux Pack here. And I'm gonna go ahead and weigh it, and we'll take some measurements, and I'll be right back. So going right ahead with some measurements of this thing, the main body of the battery is going to be about 130-ish millimeters. But if you measure all the way from the big old shock absorbers, it's going to be around 155 millimeters in height. And then in width, the body of the battery is about 240 millimeters. But if you include the little strap parts, it comes out to about 270 millimeters. Then finally, the depth of the battery itself is about 210 millimeters. But if you include the charge ports, it goes out to about 230 millimeters. So, not an insignificant size, but hey, again, lots of range. And I just noticed here, these rubber feet are actually curved to meet up with the curve of the deck. Interesting little detail. All right, so before we go any further, here is fair warning. 1, do not do any of this at home or anywhere for that matter. 2, this will definitely void your warranty. And 3, don't do any of this. I know what I'm doing. I built a lot of batteries up to this point, so I know the dangers of the voltages that we're dealing with here. And I'm going to be very careful when disassembling this battery. I'm going to hope that Exway does not get mad at me for taking apart their battery pack, but it's going to be a very interesting experience for all of us to find out exactly what goes on inside of here. And the first thing to that end is I'm going to go ahead and probe out each of the discharge ports, or charge ports rather. The discharge port here and the charge port, we're going to see what voltages are sitting at those spots. I'm going to attempt to get into the little pins in there. Actually, I'll probably just use the connector itself to see what kind of voltages we're getting on those additional, data pins. So let's get started. All right, so first things first, let's just go ahead and probe out the discharge port. This should be reading exactly the same as the battery voltage, the 48.6, I believe. 48.2. What does this say? 48.2. Okay, yeah, so 48.2 volts here. Your positive is going to be the one on the flat side, it looks like. 48.2, yep. Your positive is the flat side of the connector, which is always good to know. Now on our charge port, we're going to probe that out, see if there's voltage there. There is 48.2 volts on the charge port, and looking at the battery from the charge port side, the right one is the positive. So that's to be expected. There is live voltage at both of those, so be careful, of course. Helps that they're both female plugs, so it's a lot harder to get something shorted in there. There is an O-ring on the charge port cover here, and this double O-ring kind of, I guess, stopper will stop any water from getting in here, but I'm not really sure why this is necessary except for storage, because when you're riding, obviously, you'll have the cable plugged into it. So let's go ahead and plug the cable in, and we'll go ahead and probe out what we're seeing on these little pins that they have. I'm guessing that these are data pins to tell the BMS what kind of voltage we're looking at and if it's okay to charge or not. Now, this is where it gets really sketchy because these pins are very close together, but I have steady hands and I've been working with electronics for a long time. So, got the negative on the negative lead, positive on the positive lead. We've got 48.2 volts there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and try to probe to each of these other pins in here and see what they give us. So go for the negative and go to one of these pins. 0.15 volts. Interesting. 0.14 volts. 0.15-ish, 0.14. And 0.02 volts. So almost nothing at each of these. Let's see. Also, I don't know if you can see the pins in there. They're very small. Let's try going to the positive and see if that makes a difference here. Again, being very careful here to not short out these pins onto either of the positive or negatives. Okay, so to positive, 0.09, 0.09, 0.10, and again about 0.01. Interesting. So I guess these pins are probably not active when the other side is not plugged in. So when we take out the lid, I'll see where those cables end up going. All right, so let's begin the disassembly. There are quite a lot of screws here, and I just cannot be asked to use the manual tool. So we have a T20 here that we will be using to unscrew all these screws. So first, I'm going to take off the screws holding the giant rubber pieces on. We'll just leave the screws with them so I don't lose them. Always important to remember where things go when you start disassembling electronics. There you go, there's our 4 feet off, and now let's take off this giant rubber piece in the middle. I'm guessing this is also just shock absorber, not actually holding anything together. Oh, that is why Torx is good. Alright, there we go. Big old rubber piece. Goes into some standoffs. Nice. Alright, now it looks like we have a ton of screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. 26 Torx and hex screws holding this thing together. Now, the question is it just the hex ones holding it together and then this holds the internal battery to it? Don't know. Let's find out. Alright, so we've got our 3mm hex bit here. I'm going to go around the outside. Ooh, nice and tight. Oh, my drill was on weak mode. I'm going to go ahead and unscrew all these. I'm just going to leave them in place for the moment. I assume that all these have Loctite on them, so we'll have to reapply once we finish up here. And it seems like there's some rubber washers inside of these holes, which makes sense. Keep the water from getting in the screw holes. Alright, so that I think is all of the hex screws. Oh, it does seem we have a little bit of movement here. Wait, do these go all the way through? Oh my goodness. Well, that is certainly not what I expected, but good to know. These all go all the way through? Oh, no. Just some of them. Maybe just the outside ones? Interesting. Outside, outside. Let's see. All along. Huh. Yeah, so all of the 8 outside screws are long. Oh, and the center ones are long too. And I missed a screw. So it seems like my guess might be correct. These Torx screws might be holding the battery to this base plate. So good to know, and good that I didn't unscrew it yet. So we have 4 small screws and then a bunch of long ones. So I'm going to go ahead and take out all the long ones and make sure they're all the same length. There is a good bit of thread locker on these, it looks like, so I'll make sure to reapply a good amount when I screw it back together. Set those aside. And now let's see if this just comes off. Looks like the top is what's coming off, so maybe I'll take out these small screws. Four small screws, all the same size. And we'll flip this over. And the lid will lift off. And of course it's lifting the wrong way. Ah, very nice. Okay, let's turn it around. Be careful because there's some cables here. And now we can see all the electronics inside, which there are actually a surprising number, especially up here. Way more up there than I expected. So what we've got here. So we have a small board here, a couple of controllers on it, a bunch of resistors. This looks to me to be a split stacked up BMS. Never seen one like this before. We've got all of our balance leads going down into the battery, which appears to be absolutely caked into the enclosure with silicone, so don't think we're going to be able to see much there. Got a gasket around the outside that compresses when you screw together the enclosure. I've seen ones like these before. Got our big discharge leads coming out of the positive and the BMS. So negative goes into the BMS here, goes through the BMS, comes out the negative, out to the port here. Now we have an A and B wire here, which make up 2 of the pins on that 4-pin additional area. And I'm not sure what those are for, kind of hard to tell. Everything is caked in silicone, so it's gonna be hard to probe around here at all. But there's 2 ear wires. Up in here, I guess, is the rest of the charging circuitry. I forgot that there was these USBC ports. So USB-C port over here, USB-A port there, charge port here, and that all gets managed through this board. I wonder how the charge gets to the BMS. Interestingly, we have, you can't see it, but I'll show it in a second. There's a daughter board up here that has the charge indicator, and that is literally just plugged in with a USB-C cable that goes into this port on the BMS that says light board. So very interesting. Would not have expected an internal connector like that, but that's quite unique. All right, I'm gonna cut and we'll do some B-roll of this, and I'll be right back. Now, given that everything is so tied down in here, I'm not sure how much deeper I want to go, because I do have to give this pack back, at least as of the time being. So I don't want to break anything. It would be interesting to take off this board, but it looks pretty difficult to figure out where the screws even are that hold it down. So probably not going to mess with it too much, but it's very interesting to come in here and see what's going on. Interestingly, there are some solder balls floating around in here, which is not really ideal, but pretty good looking overall. Everything is decently well insulated. I would have liked to see maybe some conformal coating over this board. Actually, it looks like there is. Yeah, there's conformal coating on here. So everything in here appears to be decently well insulated, well built. Nice plastic insulation around here. Can't say much for how the cells are welded or anything like that, but looks pretty good overall. I'm going to see what those other screws on the bottom do, if I'm able to take off this outside part at all. It looks like there's a lot of silicone here, so I'm guessing that's not going to happen, but I'm going to attempt it. Oh baby. Oh, this one's still in there a little bit. All right. Okay, well, that's about what I expected. So inside here we have the battery. As you can see, this is a 12S6P battery. The size adds up about to that anyway. And in here you've got completely potted silicone deal. And honestly, this is probably the best way to make sure that the battery doesn't go anywhere. There's also some pieces of foam around the outside, which I assume they put in there when they first lay the battery in, and then they just probably fill it completely with silicone. So the more you know. I'm not going to unscrew these. I'm sure that these are what's holding this, what I assume is FR4, the glass fiber board. It's probably holding this to the top part all the way through. So I'm not going to mess with that, but hey, now you know. All right, it's important to make sure that the top gasket is aligned, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we get that lined up properly. Sitting down around the edges. Okay, there we go. Now we got all these screws put back in. It actually looks like there's a decent amount of thread locker stuff on here still, so I'm not going to re-Loctite these, but hopefully they all align properly. All right, well, that was the teardown and opening up of the Exway Aux Pack. It is an extremely interesting product, and I think it is built fairly well. I would like to see a little bit more polish on the inside, but nobody should be opening this up anyway. So I wanted to take a minute to elaborate a little bit more on my experience inside of the Aux Pack. As someone who builds very high quality custom batteries, I wouldn't say that the inside of the aux pack is necessarily up to the standards of a high-end DIY boutique board or something like that. But overall, there were no major issues that I saw besides the solder balls. Kind of unacceptable to leave something like that in there. And a little bit of sloppy adhesive placement, and some of the gray material was cracking a little bit and was distributed around in the case. They're all kind of minor issues. All the cables were well fastened, strain relieved, and didn't appear to have any pinching issues. So honestly, it's all right. There's a price that you pay to get this versus a fully custom one, but it should do the job for most people, and no one else is really going to be opening up their batteries. So providing this background info is kind of just a convenience, and hopefully you guys found it interesting. Overall, very well built, solid metal construction, great strong joints and stuff. I think it's mostly water resistant. I'd be a little bit cautious about water getting in through the top part, but everything seems to be sealed pretty well, so not too much worry there. Anyway, I doubt anyone else is going to be opening up their $1,000 battery, so hopefully you found this interesting, and thank you Exway for sending this over, and hopefully you enjoy my DIY-esque coverage of this production product. So I will be coming back with this pack for a couple more videos in the future to do range tests and etc. So stay tuned, get subscribed, and like if you like the video. Stay safe, keep on riding, and peace out.